This episode of UK Low Carb Podcast is sponsored by Deliciously Guilt-Free. Enjoy the show.
I am so delighted that I get to welcome back my good friend Pauline Cox back to UK Low Carb, and we now have a weekly series called The Pillars of Health. Each week, Pauline will dispel the misconception that if we eat well, then we're healthy. We'll explore together bad lifestyle habits, the stresses of life, poor sleep, lack of exercise, sedentary lifestyle, poor gut health, and poor liver function, and see how these can cause chronic illness and fatigue. The pillars of health are those key areas that we can take control over to live a happier and healthier life. And if you would like to engage in this conversation as we go through each week, then you may through our Facebook group, UK Low Carb. Now over to Pauline to tell us more. Welcome back, everyone. We have now been through 3 episodes when it comes to the pillars of health. And for episode number 4, I'm joined once again by the lovely Pauline Cox. Hi, Pauline.
Hello.
It's
Nice
lovely
to be
to have
back,
you back.
Dan.
Yeah,
it's
been a little while. So just to let people in behind the curtain, if you're watching this on YouTube, you might be thinking, well, I'm sure they had more tans and summery clothes when they were last doing this. It's now October, we're now making this show, and it was August we made the first 3. So this is the second half of our series. And if you are looking on YouTube, we're sporting we're wearing basically more like autumnal and winter clothes now. But the series has gone out and we've got the first 3 out there already. So we've talked a bit about fuels and how to fuel our body, which of course is vitally important for anyone who wants to know about health generally. I mean, just before I go on to the next topics, Pauline, just this morning, somebody said, I'm doing a very restrictive calorie diet and that's going to help me lose weight. And I thought, it's so simplistic, the calorie in, calorie out. If you understood the fuels a little bit more, let alone the hormonal response, just what fuel your body needs, then actually you could do a lot better, couldn't you?
Absolutely. And it feels like it's something much more sustainable when you're enjoying the journey, when you're still able to eat those foods that are delicious and palatable and you look forward to. And really, when you're able to stabilize your hunger hormones and you're not in that position where you're constantly obsessing then about foods and you're thinking about foods because you're restricting your calories, which actually inevitably can slow down your metabolism as well and have a negative impact on weight. And a lot of research has shown that when individuals do that restrictive calorie diet, then they can't sustain it and inevitably their metabolism slows down because of those restricted calories. Then they end up gaining more weight in the long run because of that slowed metabolism. So,
and actually, that's a celebration of how amazingly evolved your body is to survive hardship, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You're not a watering can that you literally pour some water out and you've got less water inside. Your body is very able to say, hang on a minute, start slowing down the amount of weight we're losing, start trying to maintain this. And then as soon as water, or in this case, food's available again, let's really try to load up so that we don't lose our energy resource.
Completely. And as you say, it's an incredible adaptation that our body has to its environment. So we are constantly adapting to our environment. And there's a real difference between fasting and time restricted eating and a low calorie diet. So, I'm a huge fan of fasting, as you know, and intermittent fasting, time restrictive eating. But when it comes to calories, I don't think I've counted a calorie in the last 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. And fair play to you. Now, the next 2 topics, we talked about gut health and we also talked about the liver as well, and how there's a relationship in your body with these different parts of your body. And in fact, in particular, I thought it was interesting we talked about the liver and, the fact the liver is doing all this work for us day in, day out. And you can probably function without realizing your liver could be getting more and more sick until eventually your liver just cannot function anymore, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, the liver takes a lot of rap without us even necessarily knowing. It's kind of the fall guy of the body. And one of the very early symptoms that our liver is struggling is often fatigue and weakness. And that's quite a general symptom for a lot of people these days. So we just put it down to we're overworking, or I'm tired, or I've got a lot on my plate. And so we don't necessarily think straight away about our liver. But we do live in a pretty toxic world. Our livers are under a lot of stress and duress from the foods we consume to all the different plastics and toxins in our water, in our food and food production, in our environment. The materials that are in our houses that we're breathing in. There are constant toxins entering our body, and our liver has the hard work of processing and detoxifying. So it also has the job of producing bile, which is an incredibly important job. And so the liver does a great deal in the body, and it often gets a hard time with the foods we eat and some of the lifestyle habits we take up, like alcohol and high sugar foods.
Definitely. Now, there's something that I've actually learned since our last set of recordings a bit about the microbiome. And
Mm,
I thought it was really interesting. Now, you might know this already, and maybe it's common knowledge just because I'm not in this space so much, I didn't realize. But apparently, the appendix, they always used to think it was pretty much redundant as an organ. But did you know about this? They've actually now discovered there's bacteria that's kept in there by the body, almost like a reserve storage. So that if you, for instance, have some sort of gastric problem and you're like vomiting and you'll have diarrhea, there's actually a reserve, a quantity of your bacteria in your appendix, which then is used in your gut microbiome to repair itself again. And how they've actually done studies now to realize if you had your appendix removed, you're much more likely to have bacterial microbiome issues, which I only learned
wow,
that like the other week. Isn't that amazing?
that is fascinating. That's
In
so
evolution, there's
interesting.
very rarely like just something left
Spare
behind as a little
parts,
bit of a spare part.
yeah.
Yeah, quite often you find there is a function there somewhere. That's why it's worked so
Yes,
well, which is
yeah.
incredible. And I learned that the other day, and I was like, that's really interesting. And and it was a scientist saying this is kind of where we realize we think we know everything, and then suddenly your perspective changes, and you realize, oh, hang on a minute, it all links to the microbiome, and we
Yeah.
didn't realize. So, yeah, very
And
interesting.
we are that interconnected, Dan. I mean, literally, the body, you cannot have an impact on one part of the body without it having a knock on effect somewhere else. And this is
Oh,
why it's
yeah.
so important that we don't just look symptomatically at the body, but we look holistically at the body and the interconnectedness between the systems within the body, but also our interconnectedness with the planet, our environment, the people within our lives. They all play a part in the health of the individual.
Yeah, love that. And actually, Nicola Howard did a series before you, and she was talking about a lot about that, the relationships we have with
Mm,
each other, the environment, all those things are linked together. Completely agree. Now, let's move on then to our next topic, which is what we're talking
yes.
about today, and that is sleep. Now, if you're on the Facebook group UK Low Carb, you may have seen I've been posting in there about my sleep because I'm holding at the moment an accountability for sleep because I feel like if I do an accountability like some people do for food or exercise, then that's my way of showing to you that I'm trying, and then it makes me think, right, I better take this seriously. And just to give you a bit of background, because I find that you can get sleep advice, Pauline, sometimes where it's like we need to sleep is really important, and I know how
Mm,
important it is, and I'm sure you can tell us that. But also, what practical things to help me sleep? So
yes.
the thing I think is when my sleep is knocked on the head, then everything is a problem. So, cravings are like way stronger. In fact, they're not even there when I'm not tired. But when I am tired, wanting to eat and being hungry is kind of at the forefront of my mind sometimes. And so, I will naturally, I mean, I've actually got a bone broth, which I've been living off the last few days, which has been fabulous. I made it myself. But when it runs out, and if I need something and something's not so optimal, should we say, for health, I'm probably more likely to go and grab that thing and think, oh, that's good. I needed that.
Yes.
And so my food is knocked on the head when I'm tired. I find my relationships get strained and damaged because I'm not firing all cylinders and I get more irritable and less patient. And especially with having young children and life
Yes.
being so busy as it is for all of us, you tend to then find you can't deal with those things so well. And thirdly, I think is my productivity and my drive is not the same because I'm just
Mm,
not functioning. So I didn't sleep very well last night for a reason I'll go into. The night before, though, I did for 8 hours and I was like really beasting it at work yesterday. So there's clearly a link here between my productivity and my feel, my mood, and everything else.
yes.
So it's really important, this topic for me, because I think if I sort sleep out, then a lot of other things can probably follow in like a pattern behind it.
Absolutely. And you know what, Dan? I very much feel it's the same for a huge amount of individuals out there, is when you really get to grips with sleep, everything else starts to improve because we make better choices when we've slept better, as you've been noticing yourself. Our
Yeah.
cravings go through the roof when we haven't slept well. And one of the reasons that happens is because our blood sugar stability, our insulin sensitivity is just nowhere near as optimal as it is when we have good sleep. And so that, I don't know, that some small kind of low carb something that you might eat in the day will have a much greater impact on your blood sugars than it would have the day before when you had optimal sleep.
Wow.
So,
I wonder
people
why that
often,
happens. Why does your body like respond so dramatically to that? I wonder what's
it's
going on there.
well, there is a lot that's going on, really. It's to do with our stress hormones. It's to do with gut health, because believe it or not, our gut bacteria are hugely influenced also by the level of sleep we have. And
Oh,
yes, so your gut microbiome can literally change depending on having less and less sleep. And there was a very interesting study with men, actually, that was conducted where they sleep deprived men to 3 hours sleep a night over a number of nights, and they all began to gain weight. They hadn't changed their diets, they hadn't changed anything about their nutrition or eating habits. It was purely the sleep element. And I don't think it's
wow.
very widely known that sleep is very important for our weight status, for our fat accumulation, particularly visceral fat, and for our blood sugar stability and our insulin sensitivity. So, a lack of sleep has a big impact on our stress hormones, it has a big impact on our insulin levels, and it has a big impact on the foods that we would ordinarily eat and our body would happily, cope with, and our blood sugars would stay stable, start to creep up. Those same foods when we've had a poor night's sleep.
Wow, because you know what? The actual whole premise of this show, or sorry, this series, should I say, is that you said it's not just the food you eat means you're healthy, it's all these other
Mhm.
things. So you're directly
Yes.
saying that exact point. You can have the same food one day or the
Yes.
next, and depending on how much sleep you've had, your body responds differently to it.
Completely. Absolutely. And
Wow.
and that's why it's so important that we really look at ourselves as individuals and not as what's on a label of a food, for example. Oh, this only has 9 grams of carbs, or this, this might have 15 grams of carbs. We would all respond to foods differently in terms of our blood sugars. So if we're having great sleep, if we have good magnesium reserves within our body, magnesium is very important for keeping our blood sugars stable. So magnesium's needed for to help insulin usher glucose into the cells. And often when we're very depleted in magnesium, we cannot sleep. Magnesium is incredibly important for
That's
sleep.
interesting. Right,
Magnesium,
right. Pauline, this always happens. I'm now forgetting we're doing a podcast, and I'm genuinely just want to ask you questions now to help me. So sorry, listeners. I hope you get something from this as well. Right, magnesium. Right. So
yes,
you hear people talking about it on these groups, and I'm going to be completely honest. I'm pretty ignorant to a lot of this stuff. So when I did the fast, okay, so it was a horrendous time to do a fast because my son had been in hospital. We had a real health scare. Turned out, thank goodness, he was fine. But it was pretty stressful, and so I tried to fast in the middle of all that, and it was disaster. As of course I could have predicted, it probably could have been. But I was actually vomiting while I was fasting, and somebody said to me that maybe I had a depletion of magnesium, and actually I
mm,
should have some as an electrolyte. And I thought, you know what, I've always seen that on these groups. So can you tell me a bit more about magnesium and why that's
yes,
important? But also, where do you get it from if you're not supplementing? And I probably will supplement, but
yes.
where do you get it from if not?
So magnesium has a huge job, let's say, in the body. It's involved in over 300 metabolic or reactions within the body. So it's very important for energy. It's very important for physical relaxation. So if you have muscle tension, magnesium helps to release any tension in the body. So even people who have things like constipation, the bowel is a muscle. So if you're constipated, then magnesium can help relax the bowel. Magnesium's needed for women to make progesterone, so balancing out our sex hormones. Magnesium's needed for good bone health. It's needed for producing something called GABA, which is a very important sleep relaxation hormone for producing serotonin. I mean, the list is quite extensive.
Wow.
However, what's important to recognize is magnesium becomes easily depleted. Now, if we have high blood sugars, and that might not come from diet, that might come from stress, that might come from systemic inflammation, it might come from having insulin resistance, which causes our blood sugars to creep up. So there are multiple sort of scenarios that can lead to our magnesium levels being depleted. When you have quite a high sugar diet, let's look at diet for a moment. When we have quite a high sugar diet, it depletes magnesium. Then we start to develop this situation where we're insulin resistant. And for insulin to be optimal, we need magnesium to help usher the glucose help insulin usher the glucose into our cells. So it almost becomes this kind of downward spiral. Which came first, the lack of magnesium, or the high sugar diet, or the lifestyles leading to insulin resistance and high blood sugars? So magnesium is a very, very important nutrient for helping with insulin resistance, for helping with mentally relaxing, producing these feel-good hormones like serotonin, like GABA, which is our relaxation hormone, very, very important at night. So if you're lacking in magnesium, you will find you're going to bed and you're still quite wired. Your brain will not switch off easily. And magnesium in different forms, and that's the other thing to really look at, Dan, is you can go to a health food shop. I mean, I have people message me, send me images all the time of their magnesium supplement. This is what I'm taking. And it's a high street magnesium oxide compound, which the body might, if we're lucky, absorb 10%. So
Oh, really? Oh,
absolutely.
Wow. They didn't tell you
Magnesium oxide is very poor bioavailability to the body. So we have different types of magnesium compounds that can help the body in different ways. So magnesium citrate is very good for gut health and digestive health. Magnesium biglycinate is one of the magnesium forms that will cross the blood-brain barrier. And that allows the brain to then access this very important mineral to create that relaxed brain, that brain that's ready for a deep sleep.
Wow, bloomin' egg. Right, okay. So I'm going to have a look in like online in a little while for magnesium. If you can advise me, that'd be great. So, okay, so last night, exactly that situation. I go to bed and okay, I could go. This is a weird thing with my circadian rhythm. I could go to bed at 6 in the evening when I'm
Mm-hmm.
really, really tired. And I mean, I'm putting the kids, I'm getting them fed. I've not eaten myself yet, but I could eat at that time. And I generally like trying to just get them sorted out for bed, bath, pajamas, into bed, etc., etc. And by about 7 o'clock, I could easily go to bed and sleep for about an hour. And then, but I don't, because if I do, then I know it's going to affect my sleep later.
Yeah.
And then the weird thing is, I am buzzing wide awake from like 8 till sometimes 2 in the morning.
Yeah.
Really, the most creative, the most energetic. I can literally learn things. I can read. I can, without feeling tired. I mean, I do use a lot of screens, so I think that's probably part of the problem. But I'm being honest on that. But I can actually do a lot of my thinking, everything at that time of night.
Yes.
But the thing is, though, the way that society is and children and school times and stuff, I'm up at kind of 6:30 to 7ish. So that's 4.5 hours. That's rubbish. And so that does have a knock-on effect, and I feel rubbish. But the next night I'll be buzzing at that time again. And so what I've done is made myself go to bed at 11, but I'm lying there wired, like, oh, this is my most creative time. And I just really wish I could go and do something right now, but I won't,
Yes. So your circadian rhythm is slightly out of sync by the sounds of it. And that's very, very common, Dan, incredibly common because of the way we live. As you mentioned, we're kind of fitting ourselves, we're trying to get our biology, our cellular circadian rhythm to work around our lifestyles. And the body doesn't like that.
Yeah.
So there are ways we can really start to optimize those peaks and troughs and help our body. Because one of the natural kind of 90-minute cycles of the circadian rhythm to try and catch is 10:30. Now, that's a really nice time when your body should be starting to feel tired and ready for sleep. But let's take a few steps back to look at some of the lifestyle habits and rituals that can really help get us ready for having this amazing productivity during the morning or even in the early evening. Because the other thing to really note here, Dan, is there are such things as early birds and night owls. We have people with just brains that like to wake up early, and then those who like to stay up late. And interestingly, evolutionary wise, the belief is that we have these two different types of individuals because as we became land dwelling, as in we used to sleep up in trees. And this was before we had this REM sleep, this very deep form of sleep. And then as we became more into this deep form of sleep, we started sleeping on the ground. So because if you were to have that very deep form of sleep in a tree, the chances are you're so kind of deeply
You're paralyzed,
asleep,
aren't you?
you could fall out the tree and severely hurt yourself. However, when you're having this very deep form of sleep on the ground, you're all of a sudden very susceptible to predators and animals coming and attacking your tribe. So the belief is that there are different individuals, those who stay awake really late at night, whilst the early birds go to sleep, or sorry, those who like to sleep earlier fall asleep. Those who stay awake later can keep an eye on the tribe, and then they go to sleep, and you have the early risers. So there's about a 3-hour crossover where everyone's asleep, reducing the chances of a predator.
Right. So Richard Morris and I from the Two Keto Dudes, we've talked about this, and he's a night owl as well.
Yeah.
And we basically said his ancestors and my ancestors were like the type around the fire. We invented fire, and then later we invented parties, and it's the early birds who invented work. So thanks for that, guys. But then you kept the tribe alive, so
Exactly. But and I think the point is we don't fight it. If you're a night owl, fine, but then you just want to make sure you're still getting that optimal sleep in the morning. Now, it's not always practical when you have young children. I get that. So it's about getting the best of both worlds. So what we want to try and do is catch these rhythms so that we do fall asleep naturally, but it starts from the morning and the routine in the morning. Now, what you don't want to be doing is drinking coffee first thing in the morning. You want to wait 90 minutes before you start drinking coffee, because that will allow your body's natural hormone levels to start to settle. And if you're someone who feels they get quite sleepy or needing a coffee at about 2:00 in the afternoon, then you need to really look at not having coffee first thing in the morning. So a 90-minute kind of gap to allow your body's cortisol levels to naturally plateau, and you have your coffee 90 minutes after you've woken up. Now, the other thing that's really important for the body's natural circadian rhythm is getting daylight in your eyes in the morning. And that daylight can either be going for a walk first thing in the morning. It can be sitting in the garden and having your water or your coffee when you are having your coffee, but getting that exposure, even on a cloudy day, it's getting the natural daylight. And we're not wearing sunglasses. You do need to get the eyes exposed to the daylight. And this might sound, like some sort of fringe science, and it's not very powerful.
Welcome to Hippie Hour on UK Low Carb. No,
well, exactly. No, but you know what, Dan? It might seem that way, but it is incredibly important, because it's the daylight that's communicating with our cells what time of day it is. And one of the things that disrupts our sleep is being in this artificial environment where the body's losing a sense of where are we in the day? What time of day is it? And particularly, like yourself, I use a lot of screens. So it's really important for those of us who are using screens to get that daylight into the eyes in the morning. It stimulates your body. It wakes you up, literally wakes your body up. Okay, it's daylight. So we're having our coffee a bit later. We're getting daylight into our eyes. And then, we're doing sort of short bursts of work, but we're trying to keep productivity high during the day. We're limiting coffee. Maybe, I don't know what your coffee consumption's like.
I don't drink any coffee.
Okay.
So I'm a tea drinker, which obviously does have caffeine, but it's not as strong, right? So caffeine can be coffee can be a really, oh dear, I told you that about night sleep. Coffee can have a real hard hit of caffeine, can't it? And so when I was doing fasting and I can't drink black tea, so I was drinking black coffee, I noticed the caffeine was just raised, and I was like, I know it was a migraine trigger for me, I think. So in the mornings now, I can't stand tea in the morning, so I just drink cold water, and that's it. And I don't eat until like 2 and 3 in the afternoon, and so I might have a tea at about like 10ish when I'm at work. But when I wake up, I just drink water until about 10 o'clock.
Perfect. So there are a lot of coffee drinkers in the UK, and I would always say that you kind of want to avoid coffee 10 hours before bed, and you do want to avoid it for that first 90 minutes where you wake up. So if you're going to have a coffee, have it kind of mid-morning, and try not to have lots and lots of coffees throughout the day, because coffee stays in our system for quite a long time. And it really, it blocks our natural sleep hormones. So then you have your main meal at lunch, which is great, because again, what time you eat and what you eat has a big impact on your sleep. And getting a really good sleep routine, in the evening, it's getting easier now because it's darker at night, but I always sleep with a sleep mask, because it's it really blocks out any light. And really,
pitch black is great, isn't it? I think
such a difference. It really does.
Yeah.
And having another thing that you can try, Dan, is having a hot shower before bed, because it helps to cool the core temperature down. So temperature is
Okay.
really important. Having a cool bedroom, warm blankets, but a cool environment. You could have a window open so you're letting the fresh air in.
Oh, that's
A
great. I want
dark.
to go to bed now. Oh, come on. Okay,
Yeah,
it's only like, what time is it in the morning?
yeah.
I know the afternoon. It's 1 o'clock, so it's a bit early yet. But I'm planning for this
Really
already. It
plan
sounds
all these
great.
things out. So a hot
Yeah.
shower before you go to bed, cool, a cool duvet, cotton sheets, a cool room with just the parts of your body that you feel need covering. The areas that we lose most heat from are our face, hands, and feet. So that's often
Oh,
why we
wow.
stick our feet out of bed at night, because that's the area. Those are the areas that if you want to warm up quickly, warm your hands, feet, and face. If you want to cool down quickly, it's the same principle. So you're
Wow,
having a
didn't
hot
know that.
shower, you're
Okay.
using a duvet or something just to help regulate your body temperature, window open, black sleep mask. Those are going to be really helpful. Now, the supplements that are ideal for sleep, because, yes, we have a diet
I'm
that can be
writing this
super
down. Right, I've got my
nutritious.
pen out. I'm ready to write this down, Pauline.
These
Go
will
on.
make a difference. I mean, I'm a huge fan of supplementing before sleep because I just notice what an enormous impact it makes for my sleep. Now, it's not even just the quantity of sleep, Dan, it's the quality of sleep. There are a lot of people who sleep all night, but they wake up and they feel like they're hungover. They wake up
Hmm.
and they're groggy, they're still tired, they're dragging themselves out of bed. And you can have 7, 8 hours sleep, but you haven't had a quality sleep. So it's quantity and quality. So we're talking deep sleep, we're talking restful sleep, we're talking a good amount of REM and non-REM sleep. So the REM sleep, by the way, is really important for de-stressing the body, de-stressing the brain, releasing it's kind of like emptying your hard drive. So if you're not getting
Mhm.
REM sleep, you can find yourself getting quite overwhelmed in the day with too much going on in your head. So it's very important for our mental well-being to get that deep sleep. So supplements and nutrients before bed. I am a huge fan of magnesium biglycinate. So I would take two of those, actually. I take two magnesium biglycinate. I use the Terra Nova magnesium biglycinate, and
Okay.
I'll take two before bed. I also take potassium magnesium citrate. Um, and again, this is a Viridian brand. So I use a little bit more of that because when we're looking at quality supplements, often you'll find that the dosages are a little lower because they're not synthetic, they're food source. So it allows you to play with it a bit more. So if I've had a really busy day, if I've been, emotionally stressful, I have a lot going on, I'm spinning a lot of plates, then I know I need to supplement in order to compensate for the huge amount of magnesium that my body's already been using up. Because we call on that magnesium regularly, particularly if we're inflamed or we're
Mhm.
stressed or we've eaten something we maybe shouldn't have. The body's depleting it. Now, our
Right.
foods aren't a huge, rich source of magnesium anymore. It's a sad fact, and it's because the foods we eat often are over farmed. The soils are depleted. Magnesium-rich foods, you can eat lots of greens. I don't know what your diet's like, but it's not always as easy to access the magnesium from our diets as it was. But it's also not so easy for individuals to absorb the magnesium into their gut as it
Right.
possibly was in their younger years, or maybe they're stressed and therefore their gut acidity is not so great. It might be that they have some inflammation, which has led to scar tissue and they're not absorbing so well. So, there are different ways of getting magnesium into your system. And some of them are through these compounds like magnesium citrate or magnesium biglycinate. And then you can get different forms now, like nanomagnesium that
Mm.
absorbs in your mouth. It absorbs straight into your mucosal membranes. And that's a form of magnesium that doesn't need digesting because it's in these teeny tiny, very small particles in distilled water, and it literally just gets absorbed through the membranes into your system. So there are some
Wow.
quite clever ways of ramping up your magnesium levels, and but different forms of magnesiums that target different parts of the body. So as I said, the biglycinate's particularly good at crossing the blood-brain barrier. So that's one to be taking at night.
Mhm.
And there's a couple of other compounds that are quite well researched in this area. I like L-theanine. which again is it's spelled L and then hyphen theanine, L-theanine. And this is quite a nice supplement for, again, it crosses the blood-brain barrier and it can help you get into a really nice deep sleep. And sometimes, Dan, people might be thinking, well, these are a lot of supplements, because again, you can take things like ashwagandha, which is an adaptogen. It helps you switch off. It helps you get into that really nice relaxed state. And they might be thinking, well, do I need to take all of these? Once you get into that really good sleep routine, it's almost like a habit. And then the body's looking forward to, it wants to get back into that deep form of sleep again. So it may be that you can start easing yourself off, some of these supplements. Personally, I enjoy taking these supplements because I know the importance of having not just adequate amounts of magnesium, but sufficient, optimal amounts of magnesium.
And do you find you can actually noticeably see the difference if you're using the supplement to not using it?
I don't not use it anymore.
Oh, so okay, so you don't, like, for instance, not use it and then realize there's a difference. You just have great sleep all the time.
I take magnesium every night because of the difference I know it makes to me. So I've spoken to other health professionals. A colleague of mine, I was chatting to her the other day, and she was saying, my sleep's not so great at the moment. I know I have a lot of work on. And I said, just ramp up your dosage a bit. And she was like, well, I take two of these a night. I said, well, take 5 and just see. I mean, we're talking high quality supplements that aren't synthetic dosages. So you're safe within the sort of the quantities that you're taking. Anyway, she did. And she messaged me the next day and said, that's the best sleep I've had in weeks. I had 8 hours solid, out like a light, and woke up refreshed.
See, I think if I did that, then everything else would be way easier. Like, this is a real investment in your health, isn't it?
It is. It is because it's something that makes a big difference.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the last 3 years, so my son wakes up now every night and he's almost 3. He didn't do that for a long, long time, but because of like a few health things, he does get up in the night and he gets up moody as well. So it's not like you just got a child, you're trying to solve the problem and then get him back to sleep again. He's woken up, you're trying to solve the problem, and he's also annoyed that he's awake, and he's annoyed that you've woken him up, in his opinion, I suppose. So it's all that, and it's so flipping hard, and it just has a knock-on effect. But I just feel like I've had 3 years of like real grayness every day, trying to get by with very limited sleep and trying to, and it does impact my health for sure. And I actually eat incredibly strict keto at the moment, but it doesn't really have the effect I'd wish to. And I think it's sleep. So I kind of think, what, if I get this sorted out, but then my worry is if I do sleep so deeply, can I hear and wake up? I'm sure I would still.
Yeah, I'm sure you would.
Yeah.
Also, don't forget that these principles apply to your son as well. Magnesium, B6, omega-3 fish oils, really great for adult sleep, but also children's sleep. Often children are depleted in magnesium because they have such a high grain, high sugar diet. And then they are low in magnesium. So they're not getting that switch off in the same way that they need, but they display it in a more hyperactive, not wanting to go to sleep, fighting sleep. They're not getting a deep sleep. Children who don't have a really dark room, it even affects their intelligence, believe it or not. So children who have really dark rooms have a higher IQ because their brains are able to function. They're developing, they're debunking, they're connecting, they're creating all those connections. So the darkness of your child's room, the temperature, the sleep routine you have, the energy you display around sleep times, giving them those supplements, like particularly omega-3s and magnesium. There's a lovely powder called Smooth Mag, which is a B6 magnesium biglycinate cherry powder by, I think it's Terra Nova. This is a really nice kind of powder that you can mix in with a bit of nut milk or something to give a child before bed. And these things make a difference to your child's sleep, therefore your sleep. So what applies to us also applies to them.
The Grief family, they're getting their act sorted out this week. It's happening, Pauline, and we're going to get our sleep sorted out because, he is a very, very light sleeper, and he's somebody who needs it very dark, very quiet. My daughter, on the other hand, just falls asleep anywhere, but he doesn't. And so we've got to be very, really careful. So, okay, I've got some things there to work on. Thank you so much. And just aware of the time and on this episode, is there anything you want to add, though, about sleep generally as advice or something that's a good tip for us?
I do. And it leads us actually really nicely onto our next session, which is on breath work. And one of the things that has a huge impact on our day-to-day life when we're asleep is how we're breathing. And the majority of us are habitual mouth breathers when we sleep. So this is a very interesting subject, but I know it's what we're going to be talking about in our next episode, Dan. So we'll leave all the juice for
Fantastic.
the
Look
next
forward to
one.
that. So, okay, so if you can get a good night's sleep between now and next week, I hope you can, and I hope that helps you no end. And if you do need that a little bit of extra, I think the breath work will be really useful next week. So, everyone listening now, we'll see you next Tuesday. In the meantime, have a lovely week, and thank you to you, Pauline. Have a great week as well.
Thanks, Dan.